Welcome back to another episode of Inside the Trades. Sitting here is Derek Cameron, and joining me as always is Matt Consigli. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Derek. How are you?
I'm doing well. I am excited again. I always say I'm excited for our guests because I am, and I'm excited, one, because we've got a guest that's coming to us from the Heartland today, so we get to have some Midwest representation, and I'm excited about that. The other part of this is he exists in this really unique and interesting space between industry and education that I think is really critical for how we are trying to tackle what we're doing in finding some of these solutions to get people in the trades. And he can speak to a couple of these different worlds and provide us some insights that can help both of these universes or both of these circles be able to come up with some ideas in reaching the kids, reaching the parents, and reaching the teachers. So without further ado, I would like to welcome to the show Nate Clayberg. How are you today, Nate?
Derek, doing well. It's good to have you on, or have me on your show along with Matt, and always great to talk about possibilities, how we can help young people, and I even find not so young people still trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives.
Hey, I just turned a certain age last year, and I feel like I've kind of got to, find a little bit more of an idea of what I want to do with my life. So I don't think there's ever a time where you stop trying to figure that one out. So good that you're able to serve the entire lifespan of folks out there.
Yeah, when you start working with young people, and I know we'll get more into this, is you start hearing from parents going, well, do you work with adults? Or you start hearing, other younger professionals or whatever that do bounce around, and they get out in the workplace and they're like, okay, this isn't what I thought. How do you figure out what to get into, and take the risk? The risk gets more increasing as you get older to try things out.
Yeah, I've come to realize that one firsthand. So I amen to that. And what we're hoping for anybody that is out here listening is that more of these folks are looking to pursue a career in the trades, because there is a ton of opportunity out there for you, and for lucrative career and also some personal fulfillment. So before we start diving into all of this, can you lay out just your background and how you're bringing all of your skills and experiences into the work that you're doing now, and what you're seeing out there between the educational and the employer landscape?
Well, I appreciate getting the opportunity to be on, and I think back in the research that I've been doing over the last few years, and especially the last year when I launched a podcast called That's a Job, and I talked to 40 different professionals from different walks of life, and I reflect on different people I know and professionals I know, and even my own. I think there's jobs out there that we all think we're going to get into. Whether we're in high school or college, there's a job we feel like we're going to get into. But then there's the job we actually get into. And that could come out for all sorts of different reasons, because jobs weren't available, or there was some family circumstance, or an economic circumstance, or a geographical circumstance that didn't allow you to pursue that dream or the ideal job you thought you were going to go after. And you end up doing that for a few years, and then you're like, I'm not happy. I need to be more engaged in what I'm doing. So, the buzzword is you should do something you're passionate about, and that's something that I always listen to tongue-in-cheek and be like, okay, yeah, you should be passionate about it, but that's always half of it. So, there's a phrase called ikigai that I got into here a few years back. It's a Japanese concept for being, and when you put four circles together of you're good at it and you love doing it, that's your passion. But the other two circles, when you connect, and that's what's actually over my shoulder, is does the world need it, and can you get paid for it? So if you can connect all those together, you're more pursuing your purpose than you're looking for your passion. But when you follow that passion, follow that love, you do find an opportunity, and you think this is going to be the silver bullet, the answer for what my occupational happiness needs to be. And then you realize, no, it's not. And you have to pull yourself back and see yourself for what you're wanting for your life and what you're needing for your life and all sorts of things that go into it, and really understanding more about yourself. And that's when you try and find that work that you're wired to do and that really fits your personality type, the direction you want to see your life go, your social surroundings, things like that. And that was me. I was going to be in broadcasting. That's what I wanted to do. Then I realized I also wanted to be able to feed myself and afford to feed myself. So that's when I thought, okay, and a family, I got to figure out something else, and ended up in sales and selling copy machines and advertising and things like that, and then got into college athletics and was in that business for about 6-7 years. That's what I thought I was passionate about. Worked 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and new boss comes in, says, you know what? You're done. You got 60 days. And I had set myself up, I think, ahead of burning out to get out of there. So, I did something he didn't like, and it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. And that's when somebody started opening my eyes to other opportunities out there and really seeing the skill sets of communication and relationship building and marketing and those things, those traits that I embodied. And that's where I got into economic development. I had to Google it. I didn't know what economic development was. And it's really been a pathway since the last, I suppose, 13, 14 years that I got really tied into not just the community building or helping businesses expand and grow and locate, but it was the connection piece that I was hearing from employers that they were looking for more workers because they could find people. Well, today you can't find anybody, but it was what's that difference in those characteristics, and it came down to soft skills, 21st century skills, durable skills that I really started getting passionate about, and I started thinking, okay, where do you learn those? And as I got into it, I realized there's not really a specific place you learn them. So in the work that I got into about 7 years ago, we started embodying these in high school programs here in Northeast Iowa and following along with some other programs across the country called CAPS. And I have found the work I'm wired to do on so many different fronts. So, no one in high school sat me down and asked me, what do you think you want to do? What's your pathway? They may have, but they probably didn't dive deeper into saying, well, why are you interested in that? And really opening the door to what else is out there. And that's really the kind of work I try and do with young people, try and do with adults, and try and encourage other people to have those conversations too.
What's the form that this is taking, the work that you're doing now with economic development and then creating some of these educational platforms?
Well, when companies are seeing that we're doing this, and in my role with the Cedar Falls CAPS program, and we've got 9 affiliate high schools that are part of, this consortium in Northeast Iowa. I think we've got another 6 or 7 that we've partnered with in Northwest Iowa. They're very interested. You get some key businesses that are interested of the direction of where their businesses are going, and they see the gap that they're having with workforce. It doesn't matter if it's blue collar, white collar, no collar, whatever. They see they're going to have that pipeline, and they're looking now to high schools because they can't wait for them to get through college or get through community college or trade school or whatever. They want to see how they can start building that pipeline. And when they see how we're doing it with a program like CAPS, they're very intrigued because they're seeing the skill sets that they want to see come into their companies, because they're seeing skill sets come in that don't have those traits. So it has really opened their eyes to the possibilities of what high school kids can do when there's influence of what is out there as far as occupational paths, the educational paths to get there. And then there's the extrinsic values that come in when it comes to pay and benefits and things like that too. But yeah, companies are interested in how can they get these students quicker into their companies, into their operations. And that's going to start changing some things for higher ed.
So what does that look like in terms of, are you building cohorts of students that are doing the onboarding? Are they at a particular place where they're doing this and then they're going out to the industry partners?
I'm going to use our Cedar Falls CAPS program just based because I really know it, and I was a part of the beginning and the founding of what our curriculum is and direction. But when they come in, there's foundational things they don't know. There's academia processes, things like that. But even, how to dress professionally, or how to send an email, or how to do a presentation, or organize together as a team, and not just sit back and let that one kid do the group project that we've all experienced since first grade, right? So, it all comes in of how do you start working together? So, we started seeing the challenges early on that we were sending these kids out to work on projects, have career discovery meetings, and they weren't prepared. And, I think we didn't talk directly on it on our pre-call, but I went through the Marine workshop, educators workshop, a number of years back, and we started seeing how our America's Finest are trained and why they are trained that way. So we brought back some of those crucible type things that they do from the last couple weeks of the Marine training into our program called the Crucible, or the Cubicle, I mean. And they've got to do some of those office things and organization and things like that, because we do some design thinking and agile scrum training and leadership training and self-discovery, things like that, that they start to know more about themselves, how they can operate together, so they can get to work and they can do some of that stuff. The key thing with our program is we take them outside the high school building. We don't want them on campus, because when you take them off campus and put them in a professional environment, there's a light switch that just changes them from being a student to being treated like a trusted adult. And when that happens, there's a confidence level that comes in, because we trust them to leave the high school building and come to a Viking pump manufacturing building, to the campus of University of Northern Iowa, to Crichton Manufacturing, to a hospital system, to some co-working spaces, that they've got to get there in that time frame, just like you have to get to an appointment. Some don't handle that very well early on, because all of a sudden they've got that freedom. It's like they got out of jail and is this okay? Can they do this? But we've given them the trust that they can do it. And as time goes along, then it really builds in. But the key thing is getting them outside that high school building and into an environment that they see people actually doing work, and how they're acting, how they're being treated, things like that.
What's the age ranges of the students that are going through these programs?
Primarily, we have majority is seniors,
Okay.
but some of our role programs will get more into the junior level. If not, we've had a few sophomores come through. Sophomore is an interesting age to go through this program, because you still, graduation as a sophomore is 20 years away in their mind. It's not around the corner. So, but you start planting the seeds on some of these things, and doing some of these, dropping the thoughts on exploring opportunities, and that net, that trapeze net is underneath them a lot closer than as you get older in life. So if they discover something that they don't want, or they fail at a project, they can start over again. We celebrate failure, which is completely different than the mindset of academia otherwise.
Fail fast. It's a great life lesson to learn.
Especially when you're choosing a career and you look at different pathways. We had a young man that was looking to be a pharmacist, and shadowed a pharmacist and realized, he goes, I don't want to do that. That guy seems depressed. I'm not sure I want to get into that. He only got into it because, he saw the money, and he knew somebody who did it, who I think had a fancy lifestyle, but really start peeling back and getting that out of your brain, going, okay, what should you be looking at? And there's different opportunities of all types and educational needs that you need to follow those.
That's a good point you bring up there, of what influenced that kid to want to pursue the pharmacist. What is it? Let me try to figure out how to ask the question the right way. What are you hearing from students, and how their thought process is unfolding to look at what they're pursuing at this point in their lives, whether it be some of them that know expressly what they want to do when they grow up, or ones that have no idea, but they've either heard, read, seen a particular industry niche that speaks to them, and they're pursuing that.
I think, there's I guess the answer I will give you on that is, usually it's come from some sort of influence. It hasn't been necessarily from self-discovery. So, you get a kid that has worked on Legos, or you get a kid that is in the Rocket Club or Lego League or whatever, and they're thinking, well, that kid, you should be an engineer. Okay, why? Well, their assumption is, well, they know how to work with robotics and things like that. That's engineering. Okay, but does it fit them personally? And there's a lot of people in our lives and in young people's lives that generally care about us, and they want you to be successful, but also have, I think, a safe pathway. They want you to be able to, look at a steady job like an accountant. And if there's any accountants listening to this, I don't mean any offense, because we certainly do need accountants, but it's a steady job. It's going to keep existing. I don't think AI is going to take it over just yet. There's a definitive pathway to come through, get your CPA and onto an accounting program. But does that fit that person? And I think what happens a lot, especially this time of year for seniors, is there's so much on their plates that people are asking them at Christmas, at Thanksgiving. It's going to come up here at Easter. And anytime they see somebody, what are you doing after graduation? And those students hate it. They absolutely hate that question because there's no right or wrong answer to it. It's in the gray. And it's hard for students to live in the gray because they just don't know what the exact answer is going to be. But if someone says, hey, you should go to Iowa State and be an engineer, or you should go to Northern Iowa and be an accountant. Okay, sounds good to me. Let's write that down, check that box. Prom's coming up. We got graduation coming up. We've got all these things done. We'll move on to school, and then I get there and I start taking classes going, this is not for me. And all of a sudden, where you thought you were going to be, 2-3 years into school because you already came in with a semester or two done, you end up being there 6 years or end up dropping out because the pathway you were on, you didn't take the time as a junior or senior to start thinking about your pathway beyond high school. And that's a struggle. But, to go back and answer your question, Derek, a lot of it comes from influence. And I would say a lot of it comes from the mindset of, well, I'll just figure it out later. I'll just figure it out later. But that can get expensive and that can waste time too.
I mean, as an economic development professional, doesn't that completely boggle your mind to think of, one, just the outlandish cost that is associated with that line of thinking. The other part of that is that it has been pretty much the pervasive line of thinking for the last 30 years. And the other part of that is, who is the one that's going to be picking up the pieces when all of these notions go off the rails and things don't end up going how the students or their parents or any of the other influencers envision this, because no one ever really gave it much thought?
Yeah, it's, there's a pride thing, and in the Midwest, I don't see it as much as you're going to see it in your neck of the woods in the Northeast, and also seen in Colorado and also in the West Coast. But parents put so much pride on where their kids are going to school or the direction they're going. But, when that doesn't work out or the pathway doesn't work out and it's on these kids to figure it out, or you're looking at throwing 6 figures of student loans or costs that the kid ends up paying for, it can be hard. So, when you can take time, and this is where I push with our CAPS associates, we call them instead of students, associates, is this type of opportunity, this 2 hours a day is giving you that chance to, even if it's Google research, or being able to say, this is when I'm going to go do a tour of a school or a program, or go talk to a business that is in this type of work, or a professional, or work on a project related to that. You don't get that in the main building and through regular curriculum, not on purpose anyway. You kind of have to do it outside of that. So when you can find an opportunity, because I wouldn't say all kids, but a lot of kids don't take that opportunity beyond the bells, if you will, to do that exploration and think through it, because it doesn't seem like it's immediate enough to maybe put the attention until it's too late and you're in your third year of pre-med or third year of engineering, and you realize, okay, this isn't what I want, but I'm this far in, I better keep going. And then you end up in a job that you sit there for a few years and you realize, okay, I don't like this. And you go back and get your master's and then find a job you think you're going to love. And now you have a house and a kid and a dog that doesn't like you. And the dog would like you if you had actually spent some time in high school and maybe planning some things out. Maybe that was extreme, Derek, but those are some root causes of some things of why a dog may not like you.
I was just going to say, maybe if just walk the dog, just walk it. That's all they just need is the exercise, discipline, and affection in that order. Cesar Millan quotes aside, this thought came up recently, and it keeps coming back when I'm listening to you were on the Disrupt Education podcast, and you and Peter and Allie were talking about your program and everything, and this theme kept coming up in other places too. It's permission, and it's finding the permission in life to be able to pursue something or to be able to think about something. And everything that you just mentioned, it just feels like everybody's on rails right now, from kids, from, cradle on up. I mean, I've got 2 little ones at home, and we've got our schedule, we've got the routine and the activities, and the kids are on that. And I'm not going to go all old school to be like, when I was a kid, we just played out until the street lights came on and that was it. Though there are some virtues to that. I mean, but there's so much scheduling that's going on right now, and it just feels like we're lacking the permission structure for kids to be able to pursue the things that they truly want to do. And I don't know how you break that cycle or how you amend the cycle so you can build more of those components into it. So when kids are in 4th grade and they really like building model rockets or playing with Legos or being a veterinarian and doing operations on their stuffed toys and things like that, that we can just foster and just help them appreciate that and just help them be in the moment with that. So as they do go through these other points of life where the systematized aspects of education and all the other very formalized processes that are in place, they don't get thrown into that. They don't get thrown into the mixer and then just get thrown on the rails.
A lot to unpack there, Derek.
That's why you're on the show, Nate.
Yeah.
You're supposed to answer every one of these questions today.
I'm probably not going to be popular in this, but, I guess I go back to the same answer I had on the previous question was there's a lot of people that influence the choices we make, and we don't always think why we're making those choices. So, I think it's everywhere in the country now. There's, club sports have taken over interscholastic sports or scholastic sports and or other activities that you feel like, well, the Joneses are in this, we better be in this, or the Johnsons are in this, so we're better be in this. Okay, does the kid want to be in that? There's some value, there's definite value that you can get out of a lot of these different activities. But when a kid's playing 140 baseball games in a summer and he's 12 or 10, I'm going to question that because that kid's going to get burnt out on it. And
then going to pitching camps and hitting camps and then talking to specialists,
Yeah, so, I with my kids, they weren't gifted with athletic ability. Just the speaking ability, which I guess is maybe better for them. But, I want to make sure they're having fun. That's always a question when I'll talk to relatives or friends. Are your kids having fun? Is this what they want to do? And if they say yes, I gotta follow along with it. But I do worry the longevity or the long impact of this type of overscheduling on our future workforce, as far as being able to make decisions on their own, what they're wearing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, and even who they are. I question that as we move forward because we're already seeing some of this within companies that are struggling with some of these culture pieces because of the mindset of, if I don't like it, I don't want to do it. Or expecting to be in the starting lineup at the company when you still have work to do. there's a lot of different pathways you can go on that. But how are we as a society? And I was hoping coming out of our shutdown and our lockdown, when kids weren't on fields and parents weren't in bleachers and the family unit was together at home, which I know unfortunately increased our divorce rate, and but also had some impact on, I think, on getting to know each other a little bit more, on what our interests were. There were some deeper conversations. I was hoping some of that would stick, but it hasn't necessarily. But there are impacts that we're going to see within employment because kids, and I see this in colleges, and I worked with some of these students, and I see it in the workforce, that being able to make decisions on your own, that you've got to get out of bed, that you've got to brush your teeth, that you've got to go to the store, that you've got to get your homework done, or that you've got to get to work and work on that project, that someone's not over your shoulder always pushing you on. And I don't think, again, coming back to the influence piece, whether it's teachers or coaches or parents or whatever, I feel like I'm on a soapbox here, but how do we help these kids get to learn more about themselves and how they're making decisions and why they're making decisions? And that's a key thing. We get into some of our onboarding. We go through some Myers-Briggs type assessments, and when they go through that and they read their overview, we have kids that look at that, and I've had it before that they almost feel cheated. Like their heart is saying, this is you, Johnny, but Johnny hasn't felt like that was him because he's been directed to where he needed to be, how he needed to do it, when he was going to do it, that type of thing. So, that there's a lot to impact. I'm not sure I went down any street very far, Derek, on that, but there's a lot of things that in our world that still need to come together, and this type of education I'm involved in, and we were having these conversations this week as we advance into next semester, and our numbers have grown substantially, and it's how do you add more FTE teachers, things like that. But this is a different way of doing it, so it takes a different mindset when it comes to inside education to change, because everybody outside of education is saying these are the changes you should make. But within education, they're not necessarily quick to make them because it's a different way of thinking or a different way of process or a different way to fund it. They need different ways to how to fund it, or going back to what you said, having permission to change how they're funding it or what they're doing.
Yeah, definitely. What's the breakdown of, so the students that are going through, it tends to be upperclassmen, which makes sense. There's a little bit more maturity and there's a little bit more urgency to what their next steps are going to be. What's the breakdown of college track versus non-college track, or just the in-between kids that are not quite sure what their next steps are going to be? They might want to go to college, or they have no idea what they want to do, but that's where they feel they need to, so they're just showing up and doing this.
The cohorts have really evolved over the years. So early on, when we only had 13 involved, I would say it was probably 50-50 that were college track. There was, I'd say maybe it was more 50% college track, 25% were still undecided, and another 25% were going to get to work or get into some sort of certificate or trade program. And, maybe that has continued, but we've come across kids too that just felt like they wanted to get in this and learn some experience and have some possibilities that never thought maybe higher ed, no matter if it's what level, wasn't for them. But all of a sudden they gained the confidence to see what the pathway was. So I'm big into, when you ask a kid, what are you doing next year? I don't want you to tell me what college you're going to. I want you to tell me, what type of job are you searching for to try and get to? And then let's reverse engineer backwards. And how do you get there? So, I had, medical, I think it was medical technician of some sort, and she was planning to go to University of Iowa. And I said, well, you don't need to do that to get that type of program unless there's another need to go because you want to be a Hawkeye or because it's a family tradition or there's something else, which I'm all right with, because you do learn more about yourself outside or in an environment like that. But she said, well, my parents want me to go there. And I said, well, you'll love this. I go, who's going to pay for it? They said, well, I am. And I just looked at her, and you could hear gas in the back of the room. Oh, she was mad. I mean, Derek, she was mad at me But later on came around to see what it was. I don't know where she ended up, but those some conversations of, well, this is what you're going to, if that's what you're going to do, this is what you're going to do. This is the schooling, this is a pathway. Okay, well, let's have some conversations here, especially when it comes to how can six-figure loans or expense have an impact on your life down the road and where you want to go. Yeah, it's it really is a mix. We send quite a few actually to National Guard or Marines because we expose them to those type of opportunities. We've got pathways to community colleges, but it's kind of all over the place. If you are a 4.0, 4.0 plus AP student, they do not do well early on in this program because it's not defined on how you will get that A. It's not, here's the assignments, here's the quizzes. It's all standards-based grading. It's go as you go. You've got to step up and do some things beyond what the syllabus says, and they struggle with that. But who loves it? Like the C-level student, because now they're seeing purpose in their day of going to school, getting connected to real things, working on real projects, and all of a sudden their attendance goes up, their grades start going up because they can see a direction of where they can go.
Yeah, it's amazing what happens when you start to see your why. And not to go all Simon Sinek on this, but like those are the things where the light bulb goes off. And it's essentially why we want the show to explore how more kids can find their why that is actually aligned to the skilled trades and give them the permission or find the ways to build the permission structures within their own family, at school systems and communities that can actually help them complement that why and feed into that.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm a big Simon Sinek why type of guy too, and finite and infinite mindsets and things like that. But I'm sometimes known as the why guy because somebody will tell me something. I say, well, why? And they fear it, but they expect it, but they know it's good for them because by the time you get to that fifth why, that root cause, they've got some answers or they know where they need to try and seek out to try and find that answer. But it doesn't matter what direction you're going. And I know we got into this to talk, trades and manufacturing and some of those things, but, just really in the workforce in general, when you know where you're going, it's easier to get there. And when you can start getting exposed to researching opportunities or even given permission and guidance and opportunity to explore your interests and abilities and things like that out there, it just makes going through that life path a lot easier, and you can find some purpose with it.
Nate, do you have advice? So the whole question of finding your why, right? That's a hard thing for adults to answer, let alone kids. Do you have advice for, I'm asking as a parent, how can you get kids to put serious thought into that and not just kind of chase the shiny object or say, I want to be a baseball player because of course I want to be a baseball player, or I want to land on the moon because of course I want to land on the moon. Like, throw the sexy stuff out. Most of life isn't sexy. Most jobs aren't sexy. How do you get kids to really put serious thought into that?
The process, I guess the simple answer is to let them explore, let them see what things really are and talk to people. And the pathway to purpose I use with my private coaching, and I use it with our CAPS associates. It is, let's start digging in and seeing who you are, and there's that self-discovery, and you can do this at different ages. It's a little bit different when they're, in sixth grade or compared to being a junior. But, there's a system I go through when you take your Myers-Briggs, an ENFP or an ISTJ, that you start plugging that in and you can see what jobs are out there. And Matt, when that list comes up, it's so much fun to see their faces. Because all of a sudden they're like, well, what is that? What is that? And they kind of laugh of, it says I should be, an airline pilot, or it says I should be, an electrical engineer or a travel agent or things like that. And at that point, you don't laugh at it. You're like, okay, well, why is that? Would that be interesting to you? Well, I don't know anything about it. Okay, let's look it up. Let's get on Google. Let's get on Indeed.com. Let's get on some job boards and start reading some job descriptions that tell you what the jobs are. And I can't explain it, Matt. I'm not a social scientist, but there's something intrinsically within themselves that they get drawn to, and they see, I could see myself doing that. I hear that time and time again. I could see myself doing that. But what happens is they say that, but then we don't give them the opportunity to take action on it. Like, who can we introduce them to? What type of, is there books out there? Is there companies within your local area that you could help them explore with? And I'm a big, my economic development background is I was a professional connector. And that's where my mind always goes is, who can I connect you to learn more about that? And Matt, when they see that, like they want to be, I had one the other day that was interested in agricultural sales. And she got connected to somebody who sells vaccines for pigs, for swine. And she spent 30 minutes talking to this lady. And she was like, I could see myself doing that. She's out in the field. She's doing these things. This girl was not engaged when we started this workshop. She was just kind of throwing stuff up against the wall to see if it would satisfy me. But then when I pushed her on it, saying, well, anybody you can meet? And she started peeling back, knowing, well, one of her friends' moms actually does that work. And she got connected to it. So there's a level of confidence that comes into it. Going back to the professional baseball player or the football player or the astronaut, okay, well, what's it going to take to get there?
Yeah.
Just like what's it going to take to get your CPA? What's it going to take to become a data analyst? What's it going to take to be a truck driver? That's a process. Let's start reading into that and looking at the process and schooling or time committed or costs. I had a girl that she said, yeah, I think real estate would be fun. Okay. I want you to research, and I did a wager on it because she was giving me a hard time. I said, I will bet you a donut that, or I think the wager was she wanted a McFlurry, I wanted a donut if she didn't do the work. But I wanted her to research, how do you get a real estate license in the state of Iowa? Day later in my inbox is this whole outline of how to get a real estate license, what it's going to cost. And I challenged her and said, is that something you want to pursue? And she said, I feel like I probably need to talk to a realtor first to get a better sense. And I went, perfect. Because you're going to start making those connections, building the network. And that realtor very well may say, you know what, if I had to do it again, this is the path I would do. So making connections, gaining knowledge. But the biggest thing is, give them a deadline, give them a timeline to start doing the work. Don't just say, hey, that's cool, and then move on. Okay, what are you going to do next?
Yeah, I've always wondered, and there's not going to be an answer to what I say next, and I know experts will be divided. But I've always wondered, as a parent and being possibly the greatest influencer over what your kids end up doing as adults, like so for example, my kids are still in the phase of life where if I ask them what they wanted to be, they'd say, I want to be a unicorn, right? Like, where's the line for...
Hey, at least you're still asking the question. You got to keep asking the question.
But like where I'm going with this is, where's the line to be like, no, you're not going to be a unicorn, versus, oh, honey, I love your creativity and never lose that. Like, where's the line to say, no, let's pick something real. And then drawing that into the future, when she's a teenager, if the answer then becomes, well, I want to go land on Mars, is it then you should absolutely go do that?
But that's becoming real, right?
Well, fine. I want to go land. I want to go land on Venus, right? Like,
okay,
you should go pursue that, or is it my job to say, you shouldn't go, like, pick something different? Like, that's a really fine line, and that's a really difficult job for parents and teachers and counselors to have, right? And I've always wondered in that debate, like, how do you handle that? I thought you put it perfectly at the beginning. Like, we have to find purpose, not passion, and I firmly believe that. How do you get to that balance without just crushing dreams?
Well, I think this comes from my journalistic background, and I did a lot of this in economic development, and whether your child wants to actually be a genuine unicorn or they say they want to be a unicorn tamer, it's like, okay, I'm just going to use that one. What is it about being a unicorn tamer that you're interested in? So then you're planting these seeds on, okay, well, what is it? Well, I think it'd be cool to, to be able to comb their hair and take care of them. Okay, well, that translates into horse breeding, right? So there's some other things that kind of translate. So what you're really trying to pull out is what is it they're really interested in? What's the task? What's the job? What's the role they're really interested in? Of saying, well, I want to get to Venus. Well, what is it about trying to get to Venus? Why do you want to do that? I wanted to be an astronaut growing up. I watched as many space shuttle launches as I could. And then in 8th grade, my buddy and I, we took off and went to Huntsville, Alabama, went to space camp. And we're sitting in this auditorium, and I don't know if it was an astronaut or whoever said, all right, you kids out there, and there was hundreds of us, if you want to be an astronaut, you really need to focus on math and science. And I looked at my buddy and said, no, I don't. And that's when I realized that maybe I shouldn't be an astronaut because I was not interested in driving myself in those two curriculum areas. But, when I peeled back, what I liked was the production of, I think, of the process of launching rockets and putting the show together and things like that peeled me into realizing, okay, there's production aspects of broadcasting. And that's what I was key in college athletics. When you go to a game and it's on the video board and there's music and all and promotions, that was my work. I love putting on that show and putting that programming together. So going back to unicorn taming or launching to Venus or becoming a baseball player, it's like, okay, what is it about that you enjoy so much? And if they bring up and they say, well, because they make a lot of money, I'm always like, well, how much money are you going to need? And even with high school students, they can't answer that question because they don't have very many expenses. And usually when that comes up, there's some deeper thing on money that they want to buy something their family can't afford. So they came and said, well, I'm just going to make a lot of money when I get my job. And that's those are some things you have to balance out. But Matt, as I say, it's ask the next question. And instead of poo-pooing it, saying, well, that's ridiculous, saying, okay, why is that? So then you're putting it back in them to think a little bit deeper on it.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's awesome advice. Thank you.
Nate, I wanted to ask this one. With employers that you've worked with over the years, the ones, and tying us back to skilled trades pathway here, is what are some of the success stories, or what are some of the stories that they have that have seemed to have made an impact with creating those connections with the students or complementing their whys and helping them appreciate that field more than when they came into it?
I'm gonna speak to one just particular. It was with a manufacturer, Creighton Engineered Metals. They do metal spinning, metal manufacturing. In Cedar Falls, Iowa. They've got I think 100 people on staff, and their owner at the time, Kevin Harberts. He was a key one when I was doing economic development work. And then when I got into working with CAPS, I went to him first and I said, I don't know what this is, but you should get involved, because I knew he had the culture to try and think differently about workforce and engagement with education. And he said, all right, let's do it. So he connected me with one of their engineers, and we were looking for projects. In our program, we don't just do projects. The projects are the fuel for what we do. So we need projects to practice those durable skills and those processes and things like that. So there was a step stool that they were manufacturing for a company, Chart Industries, that does like cryogenic freezers. And this is just a step stool. It doesn't sound sexy, but this company was manufacturing it. They were having to outsource some of the work on it. So they actually were losing some money on it. But it wasn't enough that, because I think they were making it up on some other piece. But it always had been on their list. We should probably do something with that. And that engineer, Brett Kleichman, said, okay, let's give it to these two kids. One was had a mindset in design. One had a mindset that maybe want to be in manufacturing or engineering. And they learned SolidWorks CAD software and built relationships with some of the designers and engineers in their floor. And they came back and they made the steps. Well, the challenge was make it cheaper and make it prettier, because it was pretty clunky. And they made it better looking. They made it cheaper, But when they ran the numbers on it, they were actually going to now make a profit on it. So, a profit of 25 grand a year is what it was going to be. And this was just a step stool, but talking about an important piece. And that opened the eyes to engineering, to the ownership, to people in that company. These aren't just high school kids. If we give these kids the opportunity and we take the time to mentor them, guide them, help teach them, there's all sorts of things that they can get into. So we continuously have projects from Crichton. So one of those gentlemen went on to a community college for a year and then was going to go on to Iowa State University and major in engineering. And they approached him about being an intern there and kind of learning some ropes. And then I think it was the end of his or middle way through his sophomore year, he's home on Christmas break, and they approached him and said, "Hey, would you want to work here full time?" And he was ready to quit college and just go work because he loved it so much. And they said, no. We want you to go back to school, finish your degree, and when you're done, come work for us for, I think it was 2 or 3 years. And they said, if you do that, we will pay for the remainder of your tuition.
Wow.
And and then he's like, yeah. And his dad was not happy about it. He thought he was more in line for a John Deere or a Rockwell Collins or a Caterpillar or Boeing or whatever. And when the dad actually went to talk to the owner, they were in an event together, and all of a sudden he realized what the opportunity was. These two would have never found each other if it wasn't for a program like this. And I love the smaller companies because they give you so much other opportunity. So Kabir actually started working there a year ago this past January. And the cool thing is this last semester, he went from being the student working on a project to being the client who was working with students on a project. So we've had these companies, that's a key example of that they see, once they try it and they see the value, they want to be more embedded in it. And the ones that get involved because they see free labor or they see that I can get in front of these students to come work in my company, I don't really want to work with them. I want them to see how can they be engaged in a partnership, in a handshake, that they're going to be there to support our students and their learning while our students are helping their business actually have an impact for them, like creating a product that now has a profit margin to it.
Now, thinking about this in terms of scale, when you're cultivating those relationships with employers that are creating the viable experiences for these kids and putting them in positions to succeed and actually giving them real work, how do you scaffold that up to be able to create that, or how do you vet that? And before you answer that, taking that example, how do you replicate that across the U.S. or wherever else to be able to have more of these pockets or more of these opportunities built up where kids are making these connections with employers and the employers are imparting this responsibility to the kids early on to help spark the whys and the interest and the engagement piece of that? I know I threw a lot at you, so if you need me to repeat it.
Yeah, the biggest thing from the education standpoint to the client or business standpoint is mindset. So if they can see the value in that, and you can tell stories about that Crichton, and we've got some other ones out there, and it takes that person to say, okay, we're going to try this, and we're going to add resources to it. And when I say resources, it's not cash. It's how can you give us access to a project, open your doors a little bit, pull back the curtain, and allow your people to engage with us and be a part of that. So it takes those companies that see that opportunity. We had a plumbing and heating business that, that's a business that is super competitive when in the landscape. It's super competitive trying to recruit people. And Dave had the right mindset to see, okay, I'm just going to open my doors and have these kids come in and shadow along with with their technicians to see what the world is. And then they started having these conversations, with the kid and talking about the lifestyle, talking about just about how much money they can make or what it is. And you start opening their eyes to different things. So how do you scale this? It's very scalable because every company, no matter if you're a one-person shop or you're a company of 10,000 or 40,000, you have a to-do list that a student could tackle. If it's number 8, 9, and 10 on your list, that it just isn't getting done. Because if we take it on as a CAPS program or a high school program and it fails, it doesn't go well, it's still number 8, 9, and 10. But if we get into it and we start redesigning that steps tool, or we start actually putting some energy on your social media campaign, or actually helping you make an event a reality, well, we've moved the needle a little bit. And now you are dedicating more time and resource to actually pulling that off. It's like we just help jumpstart it. And everybody out there has that opportunity as a business or a solopreneur or a small business or retailer or whatever, of how you can engage in that. And what we find really neat about this is when we give these opportunities to these students and they get inside of these companies, they see what these companies have, and those companies see what these students can offer. And that's when the true relationship starts happening, and that's where that pipeline starts generating for them to potentially become an intern there, a part-time worker there, or get hired on full-time. Because we've had them, without college degrees come in and end up working on the line at Crichton or being embedded in Viking Pump and other companies that we partner with. But there's no secret to it. It's just having the mindset that you're willing to open your doors and give of your time to see how you can have an impact on education and a young person's life.
I was going to ask earlier, but I no longer think it applies just to the trades. I think it applies almost to every job. Again, going back to the passion versus purpose, I do think pursuing your passion is BS. But purpose comes with life experience. So how can we possibly expect kids to know? I'm a cynic, Nate, just so you know, I'm a cynic. Aren't we just setting everyone up to fail?
I can attest.
No, you cannot be a unicorn, is what he says.
Right. Aren't we just setting everyone up to fail?
Get that out of your mind.
How many teenagers really know your purpose? You need life experience. You need to live failures. You need all of that to then have the light bulb go off and say, okay, now it clicked. Again, I
don't expect anybody to know. I don't expect any.
That?
Yeah, you don't really find purpose, but how can you set young people up to be on their pathway to help find their purpose? So if they don't have some of those skill sets, those foundational things, and permission, going back to that again, that you can seek out other things and have experiences and things like that, then eventually down the line you may find that purpose or that work you're wired to do. But how do we set them earlier to start doing this instead of in their mid-30s when they've bounced around a little bit and have a mortgage and 2 car payments and
then you're
trapped.
Again,
that dog that hates
them.
them.
You're trapped.
Yeah, yep. and then you're still trying to figure it out. But the system is not set up. The education system is not set up to allow them to do this exploration. In the state of Iowa, and this might be different in other parts of the country, through state law, through curriculum, 8th grade, they're required to go through a career search process. What are you interested in? And then map out their 4 years of high school. That never gets revisited again on purpose. And that's where we fall off. We check the box and we moved along to try and fill the pathways to get you on to college, to a 4-year school, which again, there's some mindset changing there, but there is not that in place. So when it comes to process, I was get a kick out of education because the people in education were the ones who are really good at school. And those are the ones that don't necessarily think we can change some things because we're not supposed to change things. This is how it's always been. So how do we have time with purpose? Because a lot of times schools won't do anything differently unless it's required. And even then when it's required, they question why it's required. It's just an interesting world I've embedded myself in that I sometimes just shake my head at, going, this is so interesting of where things are at. And some do it better than others, but I had a conversation that's going through state law in Iowa right now. They're going to drop the requirement to graduate to have financial literacy training, which a few years back was we should have financial literacy training. So now in reform, they're taking it, you can still offer it, but it's not required. So what you'll have is schools saying, okay, well, that's one less thing we got to do. Or you're going to find schools saying, well, we're still going to do it.
Meanwhile, I think everyone that you talk to out there that thinks about how education should be reformed wants to mandate that
Financial
across the
literacy
board
thing,
and probably do it all 4 years of high school.
Yeah. But we're going to throw in, there was a teacher that complained to me the other day about all this reading. We got to do more reading because reading scores are down. So what do? We add more hours of reading, but there's no really purpose to it. And that's what we're getting into. And it's, I think it's every state, but the disconnect that the Workforce Economic Development offices hear from companies doesn't necessarily get translated over to the Department of Education. My colleague was on a call with actually America Succeeds 2 days ago, and they brought in educators to review these durable skills, how they're taught, that type of thing. And then the educators are saying, well, this isn't how it should be taught, but it's the workforce saying this is how it should be taught. Because for years it was education telling workforce what to do, and workforce just had to take it. And now workforce is like, no, you know what? If you're not going to listen to us, we're going to go ahead and do it on our own. We're going to do things differently. And it's that battle back and forth of what our economies actually need compared to what education wants to offer.
Well, I'm going to
ask permission to offer.
Yeah, exactly. I like the permission theme in this one. I'm going to ask a Game of Thrones question for you is how do you break that wheel? Because education seems to be the gatekeeper for a lot of what we're talking about, especially our show. How do you break that cycle and get everybody thinking about things from what the realities are? Is it going to take the fact that no one's going to be fixing their plumbing in the next 10 years to come to the reality that, oh, maybe we should actually be, creating more pathways for kids to work with their hands and creating more CTE programs and not necessarily cramming through everybody to the college pipeline?
I don't know if anybody's paid attention to it. The cost of a plumber and a mechanic and electrician to get that work done has gone up exponentially in the last 5 years, right? Or get anything built. And I would feel like, I've never heard that saying, what, if we had more plumbers, maybe that could drive the price down. Or if we had more mechanics, that would drive the price down. I don't think we've seen any of that. A lot of times what's caught in education is on funding. So anytime I hear up is, well, is there funding for that? It's not about what are we not going to do to fund this. It's we're still going to do this, but we also want to do this, so we need more funding. So there's the inefficiencies of education. So it is going to take some reform, but there's also all these other distractions that are happening within the education place when it comes to school shootings and social emotional and all these things that are out there that are clouding what we're actually trying to do. I actually sit on a school board, and we hired a superintendent a year ago, and the question I had was from Seth Godin's, his video, if you've ever seen that, What is School For? And I asked that, what is school for? And a lot of them didn't really know how to answer that. And if you think about that, and I don't know if you guys have seen that video, but find it. But what is school for? And I think we've lost track of what it is other than, well, it's just required. We all got to go through it. To get to what? Again, Matt, there's me asking the next question that people say, quit asking questions.
I have not seen the video yet. It is on the queue. And for everyone out there, I'm going to add this one to the show notes and a link to it. So you're welcome.
This is going to be a fun editing job for you.
You gotta take on challenges, man. Sometimes you just got to really spike the learning curve. And, we don't do these things because they're easy. We do them because they're hard. So there's a little JFK for you.
There you go.
All right. Well, we could go on, and I would love to for about another hour and a half on this because I feel like we're just scratching the surface here. But that's why I'm inviting myself on your show. So we'll be able to continue this one on another forum. But thank you very much for everything that you've been able to impart today and liven up our conversations and bring a lot of your world into it. And where can we find out more about you, and how can people connect with you to be able to start? Is that your dog? That I hope your dog is like not hating you.
Yeah, he hates the UPS guy.
Okay.
Even though I realize he doesn't hate him, but what he doesn't like is that he's not outside to get a treat.
Gotcha.
And we didn't realize that till I was about a year ago when we started watching the Ring doorbell and realized the FedEx guy was giving the dog treats. So that's why he gets mad and would rather be outside so he can get a treat. So there's that. So
it's not that he hates you, Nate.
He's
it's
not
just
living.
that you just got to be able to pay him, man.
So anyway, you go back to your question.
Where can we learn more about you, and where can we find you out in the world, and how can people get in contact with you and start throwing piles of money your way?
Yeah, NateKlayberg.com is the direct way to go. I'm on every social media. Nate Klayberg would be the handle on most of it, but I also invite you to check out cfcaps.org to learn more about how we're doing learning differently here in the northeast part of Iowa.
Excellent. Well, again, all of these things are going to go in the show notes, and we'll make sure we got links to those. And when we do the promotion for this, we'll make sure that everybody out there has access to all of these links for you too. So, Nate, thank you so much for coming on here today. Really appreciate that. And the door's always open for coming back on down the road, because we do like to be able to revisit some of these conversations and pick up either where we left off or just hear about what some new endeavors that people are taking on.
Derek and Matt, thank you for having me on.
Thank you, Nate. This was great. Appreciate the time.
All right, so another episode of Inside the Trades is in the books. This is Derek Cameron and
Matt Consigli.
And Nate Klayberg.
Take it easy, everybody. Talk to you soon.